In the small, quiet town of Maplewood, life moved at a gentle pace. Everyone knew each other, and the biggest excitement usually came from the yearly town fair. That is, until a series of strange events started to unfold, changing the course of everyday life. Sarah Collins was a friendly neighbor in Maplewood, known for her delicious baked goods and her love for animals. She lived in a cozy house with her golden retriever, Maximum. Sarah loved the community and often volunteered at the local animal shelter. However, things took a turn when the Homeowners Association, led by the stern but well-meaning Mr. Thompson, started to overreach in what they called community safety. Mr. Thompson was an Army veteran, and he took his role as HOA president very seriously. He felt that it was his duty to keep the neighborhood looking perfect. However, his quest for order soon turned too controlling. Residents received warnings for things like having a flower pot on their porch or leaving trash bins out too long. Sarah had received her fair share of warnings, and she found herself constantly on edge. One day, Sarah noticed something strange. She often received packages filled with supplies for the animal shelter. But lately, those packages seemed to go missing. At first, she assumed they were lost or delayed. However, as time went on, she grew suspicious. Her mail was important, and losing it felt wrong. One afternoon, Sarah decided to confront Mr. Thompson about her missing mail. "Mr. Thompson, I've been waiting for some packages, and I think there might be an issue. They're simply disappearing. Have any of the other neighbors complained?" she asked, hoping for a reasonable explanation. Mr. Thompson's face hardened. "You need to keep your porch clear, Sarah. I can't be responsible for things left outside. They might attract unwanted attention," he replied dismissively. Frustrated, Sarah left his office and returned home. She knew something was not right. Did Mr. Thompson know more than he was letting on? After talking to her friend, Lily, she learned that others had also noticed missing mail. It wasn't just her, it was happening to several neighbors. Worried and determined to find out the truth, Sarah decided to take action. She reached out to Mike, the friendly postal inspector who often visited the neighborhood. Mike was known for his dedication to stopping mail theft, and he enjoyed chatting with the residents. Sarah explained the situation, and Mike agreed to help. "We'll set up a sting operation," Mike said with a twinkle in his eye. "We'll need to work together to catch him red-handed." They decided to place a few marked packages on her porch and leave a hidden camera to record whatever happened. Excited but anxious, Sarah agreed. Over the next few weeks, Mike and Sarah set everything in motion, preparing the plan carefully. The marked packages were filled with fake items, but they looked real enough. They placed them on Sarah's porch, ensuring they were visible but not too obvious. The day finally arrived for their sting operation. Sarah felt her heart race as she waited inside her house with Max beside her. The sun was shining, and everything seemed too quiet. Mike parked his postal truck down the street, hidden from view but within reach of Sarah's camera. "Now we wait," Sarah whispered to Max, who wagged his tail, sensing her excitement. As time passed, Sarah couldn't help but feel both anxious and curious. Would Mr. Thompson take the bait? Hours later, just when Sarah was about to lose hope, she heard footsteps outside. Peeking through the window, her breath caught in her throat. Mr. Thompson approached her porch, looking around cautiously. He glanced at the street and then leaned down to pick up one of the packages. Instinctively, Sarah reached for her phone. "Here we go," she whispered, pressing record on the camera. She watched in disbelief as Mr. Thompson stuffed the package under his jacket and hurried away, his face a mix of guilt and excitement. "Gotcha," she said under her breath. It was unbelievable. The very person who was meant to protect the community was the one stealing from it. After recording the incident, Sarah quickly called Mike. "It worked. I have it on video," she exclaimed, her heart still racing. Mike was excited and promised to come over right away. When Mike arrived, they reviewed the footage. "This is solid evidence. We have enough to confront him," Mike said with a smile. "Let's head to the HOA meeting tomorrow night. This will make quite the splash." The next evening, the anticipation filled the room as residents gathered for the HOA meeting. Sarah felt nervous but knew she had to stand up for herself and her neighbors. Mr. Thompson took his usual position at the front, looking confident and strong. As the meeting progressed, Mike stood up, raising his hand. "Excuse me, everyone. I have something important to share," he said. The room fell silent as Mike proceeded to describe the importance of male security and then revealed the shocking truth. He played the video for everyone to see. Gasps filled the room as Mr. Thompson's face turned red with disbelief and horror. "You can't believe this. I was only," he stammered, but his excuses fell flat. The residents turned against him, voices rising in a mix of anger and betrayal. "We trusted you," shouted one neighbor. "How could you do this?" Sarah's heart raced as she felt relief flooding through her. The truth was finally out, and Mr. Thompson was exposed. Within days, Mr. Thompson resigned as HOA president. The community felt a burden lifted as they regained control over their neighborhood. Sarah, alongside Mike, helped to set up a new, friendlier homeowners association focused on community rather than control. As she baked cookies for her neighbors, a gesture of goodwill, Sarah felt a sense of justice. Maplewood was back to its peaceful self, and she had learned an important lesson about standing up for what is right. With Max by her side, she looked forward to brighter days ahead in her beloved town. In the quiet neighborhood of Willow Creek, where the houses were lined up like soldiers, there was an unexpected problem brewing. The homeowners association was strict, with rules about lawns, paint colors, and even the height of fences. Mrs. Jenkins, a kind woman with a fondness for bright flowers, discovered that her mail had gone missing. She was puzzled and a little worried as some of the missing packages contained important things like her granddaughter's birthday gift. Mrs. Jenkins decided to ask her neighbors if they had experienced similar issues. So, one sunny afternoon, she called a small meeting at her house. Residents gathered around with cookies and lemonade, sharing their own stories of missing mail. Mr. Thompson, a retired military man, raised his hand and said, "I've missed a few bills. This is serious." Lily, a teenager who lived down the street, chimed in. "My new video game was supposed to arrive last week, and it never came." It seemed like the entire neighborhood had been affected. They all started to talk about their suspicions, and the only person who had access to the neighborhood mailboxes, Greg, the HOA officer. Greg had always been a bit too serious about the rules. He would patrol the neighborhood, inspecting the yards and looking for any sign of disobedience. Mrs. Jenkins had even seen him getting into people's mailboxes, never with a friendly smile but always with a frown. "Maybe he's taking our mail," suggested Mr. Thompson, scratching his chin thoughtfully. The idea shocked everyone, but it made sense. We should do something about it. The idea of confronting Greg was daunting. He was known to be fierce and had a way of intimidating people with his stern look and strict voice. But the thought of losing their mail made them brave. Together, they hatched a plan. They decided to gather evidence first. Mrs. Jenkins and Lily agreed to keep an eye on the mailbox, while Mr. Thompson would talk to the Postal Service to see if they could help. The next few days were filled with tension. Mrs. Jenkins and Lily would watch the mailboxes like hawks, fearing they might miss something. They spent hours, hoping to catch Greg in the act. Then one day, as the sun started to set, they noticed Greg parked beside the mailboxes. His car was just a few feet away, and he was looking around nervously. Mrs. Jenkins whispered to Lily, "Should we call Mr. Thompson?" Lily nodded quickly, pulling out her phone. Mr. Thompson promised to head right over. Moments later, Mr. Thompson arrived, and together they approached Greg, who was now fiddling with something in his hands. "What are you doing here at this hour, Greg?" Mr. Thompson asked firmly. Greg looked shocked but managed to regain his composure. "Just checking on the mailboxes, making sure everything is in order," he said with a shaky voice. "Order?" Mrs. Jenkins scoffed. "You mean stealing our mail?" Greg's eyes widened. "I would never," he shouted, his voice carrying down the street. To everyone's surprise, he turned on his heels and hurried to his car, throwing the few packages he had in the trunk and speeding off. Mrs. Jenkins and Lily exchanged glances, knowing they had to act fast. "We need to report him," Lily urged, her voice steady. They hurried to Mr. Thompson's side, and all of them decided to go to the post office the next day. At the post office, They met with a postal inspector named Mr. Reed. He was a tall man with a warm smile who listened carefully as Mrs. Jenkins recounted the incidents. "It sounds like we need to set up a sting," Mr. Reed said after they explained everything. "We can catch him in the act." They were all surprised but excited. With some planning, they agreed to set up a trap. The postal inspector arranged for some packages to be marked as valuable and set to be delivered to Mrs. Jenkins the next day. Everyone involved was on board. This was their chance. The following afternoon, the packages arrived. Inside were fake items clearly labeled as expensive electronics. Mr. Thompson, Lily, and Mrs. Jenkins watched as Mr. Reed hid behind a nearby tree with a camera. They couldn't believe how nervous they were, but they hoped this would be the end of their troubles. A few minutes later, Greg showed up again. He looked around, checking to see if anyone was watching before casually walking over to the mailbox. Without hesitation, he opened it and snatched the packages. "That's it," Mr. Reed whispered, capturing the moment with his camera. The whole plan was coming together. They waited a few moments longer until Greg had driven away, then it was time to follow him. They tagged along in Mr. Thompson's car, keeping their distance to avoid being seen. Greg drove into a nearby alley and parked. Just then, the postal inspector followed suit, revealing himself with a police badge flashing in the daylight. "Greg Johnson, you are under arrest for mail theft," Mr. Reed announced. Greg's face turned pale as he stammered for words. "I didn't do anything wrong," he shouted, but the evidence was clear, and he had nowhere to run. Everything unfolded smoothly. The police came and took Greg away, while the neighborhood stood together, finally feeling relief. They had worked as a team, fought for what was right, and the streets of Willow Creek felt safe again. In the days that followed, everyone began to relax. With all their stolen mail returned, Mrs. Jenkins opened her granddaughter's gifts with joy. Mr. Thompson put up new signs around the neighborhood dedicated to their unity and resilience. Even Lily, the teenager, felt inspired, talking about starting a neighborhood watch program. The residents of Willow Creek learned that by standing together, they could conquer anything, including a strict HOA officer who had crossed the line. Their community was stronger than ever. It had been happening for months. Small things at first. A missing magazine, a postcard from my sister. Then it escalated. Important bills vanished. Birthday cards with cash never arrived. It was infuriating, disruptive, and frankly, a little scary. I lived in the Harmony Glades Homeowners Association, a place where manicured lawns and matching mailboxes were prized above all else. And someone, it seemed, was stealing my mail. My name is Mark. I'm a web developer, working from home, and generally keep to myself. I wasn't exactly popular with the HOA, mainly because my lawn wasn't always golf course perfect. I suspected the culprit was none other than Bob, our HOA president, a retired police officer with a penchant for rules and a simmering dislike for me. Bob was the kind of guy who measured the height of your grass with a ruler and left passive-aggressive notes on your door about your trash cans being visible from the street. He patrolled the neighborhood in his golf cart like a sheriff in a one-horse town, and his beady eyes always seemed to linger a little too long on my property. I started by reporting the missing mail to the post office. They were sympathetic but not particularly helpful. "These things happen," the clerk said with a shrug. "Maybe it was misdelivered." Misdelivered every week for 3 months. I didn't think so. I tried talking to Bob, but he just scoffed. "Maybe you should be more careful with your mail, Mark. Don't go blaming others for your own negligence." His smug grin made my blood boil, but I knew I couldn't accuse him without proof. So, I started keeping a log of every missing item, noting the dates and descriptions. I even set up a small security camera disguised as a birdhouse, pointed at my mailbox. But Bob was too clever. He never approached my mailbox directly. The situation was driving me crazy. I was constantly on edge, checking my mailbox multiple times a day, only to find it empty. I was missing important deadlines, accruing late fees, and generally feeling like I was being targeted. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I remembered an old friend from college, Sarah, who worked as a postal inspector. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but I found her on LinkedIn and sent her a message explaining my predicament. To my surprise, Sarah responded almost immediately. She remembered me and was genuinely concerned about my situation. "Mail theft is a serious federal offense, Mark," she wrote. "Especially when it involves someone in a position of authority. I think we can help you." Sarah explained that postal inspectors have the authority to investigate mail theft and can even conduct sting operations to catch perpetrators in the act. She asked me to gather as much evidence as possible and assured me that she would put a plan together. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I worked closely, communicating through encrypted channels and carefully planning our sting operation. She explained that we needed to create a piece of mail that would be irresistible to Bob, something that would entice him to take it. We decided on a fake check, made out to me for a substantial sum of money. Sarah even added a realistic-looking watermark and security features to make it look authentic. We addressed the envelope in a way that would pique Bob's interest, using official-looking return address and a vague reference to a settlement. The day of the sting arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. Sarah and her team had set up surveillance cameras hidden in my yard and across the street. They had also equipped me with a hidden microphone to record any conversations. I placed the bait envelope in my mailbox, making sure it was visible but not too obvious. Then, I waited. It felt like hours, but it was probably only a few minutes before I saw Bob emerge from his house, casually strolling down the street in his golf cart. He stopped a few houses down from mine, pretending to chat with a neighbor. But I could see his eyes darting in my direction, sizing up the situation. After a few minutes, he excused himself and continued his patrol, slowly approaching my house. As he neared my mailbox, he slowed down, pretending to admire my slightly overgrown flower bed. Then, in one swift motion, he reached into my mailbox, grabbed the envelope, and stuffed it into his pocket. I could barely contain my excitement as I watched him drive away, the stolen bait safely in his possession. I gave Sarah the signal, and she and her team sprang into action. They followed Bob back to his house, where they waited for him to enter. A few minutes later, they knocked on his door, announcing themselves as postal inspectors. I watched from my window as Bob opened the door, his face a mask of surprise and indignation. Sarah calmly explained that they were investigating a report of mail theft and asked if they could speak with him. Bob, ever the arrogant authority figure, scoffed at the accusation. "Mail theft? That's ridiculous. I'm the president of this HOA. I would never do anything like that." Sarah remained calm and professional. "We have reason to believe that a piece of mail was stolen from Mr. Mark's mailbox earlier today. We would like to search your property." Bob hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly agreed. As the inspectors searched his house, I could see his face growing paler and paler. It wasn't long before they found the stolen envelope, hidden in a drawer in his office. The look on Bob's face was priceless. His smug grin vanished, replaced by a mixture of shock, anger, and fear. He tried to deny it, of course, claiming that he had found the envelope on the street and was planning to return it to me. But Sarah wasn't buying it. She read him his rights and placed him under arrest for mail theft, a federal offense that could carry a hefty fine and even jail time. As they led Bob away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had been abusing his power for far too long, harassing me and other residents with his petty rules and regulations. Now, he was finally being held accountable for his actions. The news of Bob's arrest spread like wildfire through the Harmony Glades HOA. Some residents were shocked, others were secretly delighted. But everyone agreed that it was a wake-up call for the community. The HOA board voted to remove Bob from his position as president, and a new election was held. A more reasonable and fair-minded person was elected, and the atmosphere in the neighborhood began to improve. As for me, I finally felt like I could relax and enjoy my home without constantly worrying about being targeted. The mail theft stopped, and I even started to get along better with my neighbors. Sarah and I stayed in touch, and I thanked her profusely for her help. She told me that she was glad she could make a difference and that she was always happy to help a friend in need. The whole experience was a reminder that even in the most seemingly ordinary places, like a suburban HOA, there can be hidden conflicts and injustices. And sometimes, it takes a little bit of ingenuity and a lot of courage to stand up for what's right. It all started with a missing package. Not just any package, but a limited edition vinyl record I'd been hunting for years. I live in a quiet, cookie-cutter suburban neighborhood, the kind ruled by an iron-fisted homeowners association, HOA. Our HOA president, Bob, was a retired police officer, a man who seemed to relish the authority he wielded over meticulously manicured lawns and precisely placed trash cans. He was notorious for his petty rule enforcement and his general air of suspicion towards everyone. At first, I thought the missing record was just a delivery mishap. Packages get lost, misdelivered, or sometimes even stolen by porch pirates. I filed a claim with the post office and kept an eye on my neighbors, but nothing seemed amiss. Then it happened again. This time, it was a book I'd ordered, a rare first edition. Now I was starting to get suspicious. Was someone deliberately stealing my mail? And if so, who and why? My neighbor, Sarah, a friendly woman with a green thumb and an even greener sense of justice, suggested it might be Bob. He's always patrolling the neighborhood, she said, and he seems to have it out for you ever since you painted your front door a slightly different shade of blue than the regulations allow. I scoffed at the idea. Bob was annoying, sure, but a thief. It seemed too far-fetched. But the missing packages kept piling up. A new set of headphones, a birthday gift from my mom, even a subscription box filled with gourmet snacks, all vanished without a trace. I started to feel targeted, paranoid. I installed a security camera disguised as a birdhouse, hoping to catch the culprit in the act. But the camera only captured squirrels, birds, and Bob himself, meticulously inspecting my lawn for any rogue weeds. Frustrated and desperate, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I contacted the Postal Inspection Service, the law enforcement arm of the United States Postal Service. I explained my situation to a stern-faced postal inspector named Miller, a woman with a no-nonsense attitude and a sharp eye for detail. She listened intently, her expression unreadable. "Mail theft is a federal crime," she said, her voice low and serious. "We take these cases very seriously." She told me they would investigate, but warned me that these things could take time. I tried to be patient, but every missing package felt like a personal violation. A few weeks later, Inspector Miller called me. "We have a plan," she said. "We're going to set up a sting operation." The plan was simple, yet ingenious. They would send a package to my address, one containing a GPS tracker and a hidden camera. The package would be filled with something seemingly valuable, but ultimately harmless. The goal was to catch the thief red-handed. I was nervous but excited. Finally, I would have proof, and Bob would face the consequences of his actions. The day the package was scheduled to arrive, I was a wreck. I stayed home from work, glued to my window, watching for the mail carrier. Finally, the familiar white truck pulled up to my mailbox. The mail carrier, a friendly woman named Maria, placed the package inside and drove off. I waited a few minutes, then cautiously opened my front door. The package was gone. My heart pounded in my chest. It was happening. I quickly called Inspector Miller, who assured me that the GPS tracker was active and they were monitoring the package's movements. "Stay put," she said. "We're on our way." The next hour felt like an eternity. I paced back and forth, my anxiety building with each passing minute. Finally, I saw a fleet of unmarked cars pull up to Bob's house across the street. Several officers, including Inspector Miller, approached his front door. I watched from my window as they knocked, and Bob answered, looking surprised and slightly annoyed. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Bob's face turning redder and redder. He started to argue, gesturing wildly. Then, the officers moved in, placing him in handcuffs. Bob, the HOA president, the self-proclaimed guardian of our neighborhood, was being arrested. The officers led him to one of the unmarked cars, and as they drove away, I saw Bob's eyes meet mine. His face was a mask of fury and disbelief. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. I had caught him, but at what cost? Later that day, Inspector Miller came to my house. She explained that they had found the stolen package in Bob's garage, along with dozens of other pieces of mail belonging to me and several other neighbors. It turned out Bob had been systematically stealing mail for months, driven by a twisted sense of power and a desire to control the flow of information within the community. He believed he was protecting the neighborhood from unwanted influences, Inspector Miller said, shaking her head in disbelief. He thought he was doing what was best for everyone. I was stunned. Bob's actions were so irrational, so out of proportion to his perceived grievances. It was hard to believe that someone I had considered merely annoying was capable of such a blatant violation of trust. The arrest of Bob sent shockwaves through our neighborhood. People were outraged, betrayed, and frankly, a little scared. The HOA was thrown into chaos, and a new election was scheduled to replace Bob. In the aftermath, I learned that Bob had a history of obsessive behavior. He had been reprimanded during his time on the police force for overzealous enforcement of minor infractions. He saw himself as a protector, a gatekeeper, and he was willing to cross the line to maintain his sense of control. I got my missing packages back, though some of the items were damaged or missing. The limited edition vinyl record was scratched, and the rare book had a coffee stain on the cover. But I was grateful to have them back, and relieved that the ordeal was over. The experience taught me a valuable lesson about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. It also reminded me that sometimes, the most unexpected people are capable of the most unexpected things. And most importantly, never underestimate the power of the Postal Inspection Service. They deliver justice, one package at a time.